question that always comes up when you're talking about development in a language, especially like C++, is, wait a minute, do I have to work in the Microsoft environment, or are there other IDEs or integrated development environments that I can use? Now, I touched on this in a movie entitled Development Options. And in that movie, I kind of concentrated on what we're going to use in this course. But I want to give you just a little bit more background and a little bit more intense of a resource here, if you will, and understand that when it comes to choosing an integrated development environment, this gets down to things like why there are Democrats and Republicans. You know, people drive Fords, they drive Chevys, they use paper or they use plastic. So what I'm getting at here is some of this seems to be genetically based or something, or it's based on our environment or the particular part of the country we grew up in or the world we grew up in and so forth. And so let's talk about the basic question, what makes a good integrated development environment? Well, if you ask about 100 people that, you'll get about 110 different answers. And I know that's mathematically impossible, but it's almost that bad. A better question, the best way to think of it is, for example, get a room full of, say, 5 people and ask the simple question, what makes good music? All right? Well, it's easy to answer in some ways, but almost impossible in others. There are 1 or 2 basic foundational standards, and when we're talking about good music, you know, it's got to have, you know, a beat, it's got to have some sort of discernible pattern. It needs to be based, if you're in the Western world here, you know, on the 12 semitone scale, that sort of thing. If you're from other parts of the world, it's going to be based on what you're used to hearing, what your ear has kind of been tuned to through life. And so, you know, you might can very easily agree on those basic foundational standards, but everything past that is personal taste. How the drums are played, how they're mixed, how the guitar sounds, whether there's even a guitar, whether there's a lot of brass, whether there's no brass, on and on and on. The bottom line is you can't get 5 people to decide what makes good music, all right? You also can't get 5 people to decide what makes a good IDE, not with any kind of definite. Now, how many choices do you have? Notice I've got XX choices here because the number of choices goes up every day, it seems like. And I'll give you 2 of the most popular ones that it seems to me from the people I talk to, the things I read and see. The first one is NetBeans IDE 7.0. This is actually an Oracle product. You can use this to develop C, C++, and Fortran. Here's right off of their website, okay, this statement. You can develop professional native applications in C, C++, and Fortran for a variety of platforms, including Windows, Linux, Mac OS, and the Solaris operating system. Now, that's my best salesman voice. But NetBeans looks good. A lot of people like it. You can find a lot of comments out there on the internet. I've never developed in it a whole lot. CodeBlocks is extremely popular. I've already mentioned it before in the course. This is an open source product. It runs on Linux, Mac, and Windows. Now, one thing I want to include in the course here is this comparison chart of C++ integrated development environments, and it's actually out on Wikipedia. And here is the URL right here. Now, if you navigate to that URL, you're going to find something that looks like this, all right? And if you scroll down, you'll notice their comparison of integrated development environments here covers a lot of different languages, and we're concerned about the C++ one. Well, I'm just going to scroll down here, and notice on the C++, notice it's showing you the different IDEs, and you can actually click on each one, and it will take you to some information about them. But it's showing you the licensing, what operating system this will work with, and on and on and on. But as I scroll down very slowly here, just notice how many integrated development environments there are out there that's listed on this website, and you can even find more out there if you dig around the internet. So you've got a lot to choose from. Feel free to go dig through these things based on the operating system you're using. Notice this will run on Windows. This one will run on Windows. It'll also run on FreeBSD, the Mac OS. But just go out there and look around at these and play with them and find one you like that meets all those personal taste criteria for you. And then you can fight with other developers about what the best IDE is, okay? But I just wanted to give you this to you as a resource because even though we're going to work in the Microsoft Visual Studio integrated development environment, just because it's very easy for everybody to get that for free and to work in a common environment for the purposes of this course. The world's wide open out there, ladies and gentlemen. Go find something you really like, you're really comfortable with, and get busy with it. ANSI standards is one of those terms that you're going to see quite a bit when you read and study about C++ and a whole lot of other things in our world now. But let's talk about ANSI standards as they apply to C++. Now, ANSI stands for the American National Standards Institute. So who are these people? Well, they are they. Okay, notice the quotes. We always hear about, well, they should change this. They should make sure this don't happen. Well, ANSI is one of those they organizations, and their responsibility is to establish standards for everybody else to follow. Now, just like in a separate video, we talked about the best integrated development environment, and that's about as easy as determining what the best kind of music is. Because everybody says, we all like good music, but we have trouble really defining definitively what good music is for everybody. The same thing happens in virtually every walk of life. How do we make sure that all products and services are marketed, can be marketed consistently and will interact with each other properly because they all meet the same standards? And so that is exactly what ANSI is charged with doing, creating those standards. Now, the standards that they create and then manufacturers follow helps to make our products in the U.S. more marketable in a global economy, because you can be in another country and know that if I buy this product from the U.S. and it's built based on certain electrical standards, then I can plug it in the wall here. Even though we may use a different power configuration, it has been built to comply with our standards, and everybody's going to be cool. The best example of this is early in the American history, we had a problem with different railroad widths. Different people were building different railroad cars when the wheels required different widths on the rails. And so until we standardized on a width of the rails, trains couldn't go anywhere on anybody's track. They could only stay on their own track. And everybody, of course, realized, hey, this is silly. Let's make all the rails the same width, and then anybody's train can run on anybody else's track. That is exactly what ANSI is here to do. Make sure everybody's rails are the same width. Now, how does that apply to C++? Well, when you talk about C++ and ANSI, ANSI's job is to attempt to ensure that the C++ code is always portable. Now, what do we mean by portable? Here's a good example. That if I write code for Microsoft C++ compiler, in other words, I build it in the Microsoft Visual Studio environment and I compile it, will that code compile and run and behave on another vendor's compiler without errors? Because if I can only run Microsoft C++ on Microsoft boxes and Mac's C++ on Mac boxes and so forth, you see the problem we're going to get into. Now, the good news is that when it comes to C++, the ANSI standards have been out there for a while and they've been quite stable, so you should be okay with these. But even though the ANSI standards are supported by all of the major manufacturers out there for these integrated development environments, the compilers and so forth, you should always check before you get the newest, hottest, coolest, freest, whatever IDE compiler out there. And when write code, you need to test that, and you need to look and make sure that it's ANSI standard, because if you don't, you could spend a whole lot of time and effort writing code that simply won't run in a lot of other environments, and that's going to be problematic for you, okay? So that's what the ANSI standards are giving us. That's why it's very important to make sure that you write code that complies to ANSI standards, to make sure that you have the widest possible audience out there for the code that you create.